The rain hammered down on the narrow alley behind the upscale bakery, mixing with tears streaming down 10-year-old Lyric Carter's face. She clutched her empty stomach as hunger clawed at her insides. Through the bakery's back door, she could see them. Trays of beautiful pastries, cakes with perfect frosting, bread still warm from the oven. Her pride warred with desperation as the baker locked up for the night. She had to try, just one more time. "Excuse me," her voice cracked, barely audible over the storm. "Do you have any expired cake, anything you're throwing away?" The baker's disgusted look cut deep. He turned away without responding, climbing into his car and driving off into the night. Lyric slid down the wall defeated, her worn jacket soaking through. She didn't see the sleek black Mercedes that had stopped at the alley's entrance. She didn't notice the man in the expensive suit stepping out into the rain, his dark eyes fixed on her, with an expression that mixed shock and something that looked dangerously like protective rage. Kwon Seo-jun had built an empire on reading people, their fears, their desires, their breaking points. As the head of one of the most powerful Korean crime syndicates on the East Coast, he'd learned early that emotion was weakness. Control was everything. Power was the only language that mattered in his world. Yet tonight, standing in the rain, watching a young girl beg for scraps behind a bakery he owned through a shell corporation, something cracked in the carefully constructed walls around his heart. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old, her dark skin glistening with rain and tears, her natural hair pulled back in a neat bun despite her circumstances. Even soaked and shivering, she held herself with a dignity that spoke of better times. The worn backpack beside her looked like it contained everything she owned. Seo-jun's jaw tightened as he watched her shoulders shake with silent sobs. In his 35 years, he'd seen every kind of human suffering, had caused plenty of it himself when necessary. But this, a child alone on the streets, reduced to begging for expired food, ignited something he thought he'd killed long ago: conscience. He moved toward her with predatory grace, his expensive Italian shoes splashing through puddles. She didn't hear him approach over the storm. When his shadow fell across her, she looked up with wide, frightened eyes that held a spark of defiance, even in her desperation. "The bakery is closed," she said, her voice steadier than expected for someone so young. "I was just leaving. I know it's closed." Seo-jun's voice came out rougher than intended. "I own it." Her eyes widened further, and she scrambled to her feet, swaying slightly. When was the last time she'd eaten? "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cause trouble. I'll go." "Wait." The command came out automatically. She froze, one hand braced against the wall. He softened his voice deliberately. "What's your name?" She hesitated, clearly weighing the risks. "Hunger 1. Lyric. Lyric Carter." Lyric. He tested the name, found it suited her. Artistic, resilient. "When did you last eat?" Her chin lifted with stubborn pride. "I'm fine." That wasn't the question. He pulled out his phone. "How long?" 2 days. The admission came out barely above a whisper. "Maybe 3. I lose track sometimes." 3 days. Seo-jun's fingers tightened around his phone. In his world, people starved as punishment, as torture. This child had done nothing to deserve such treatment, except have the misfortune of being alone. "Come with me," he said, already turning toward his car. "I don't—" Lyric's voice shook. "I can't. I don't know you." He turned back and, for the first time in years, allowed someone to see past his mask. "You're right to be cautious. Smart girl." He gestured to his Mercedes. "But I'm going to a restaurant 3 blocks from here. Korean barbecue. Best in the city. You can order whatever you want, eat your fill, and walk away. No strings. Or you can stay here in the rain and continue to starve. Your choice." Lyric studied him intently. Despite her age and circumstances, she was evaluating him, looking for the trap. She'd learned to survive by reading danger. "Why would you help me?" she asked finally. "Because I see myself in you," he thought. "Because I know what it's like to be young and alone and desperate. Because my sister was close to your age when she died, and I couldn't save her. Because I can," he said instead. "And because no one should have to beg for expired cake." Something in his tone convinced her. She picked up her backpack and followed him to the car, keeping a careful distance. Smart girl, he thought again. His driver, Jae-min, barely reacted to the soaked child climbing into the back seat. In their world, the unexpected was expected. Hanok House, Seo Jun instructed. VIP room. The restaurant was one he frequented, owned by a distant cousin who owed him favors. Private. Safe. He watched Lyric as they drove through the rain-slicked streets. She sat perfectly still, as if afraid to touch anything, her gaze fixed out the window. "How long have you been on the streets?" he asked quietly. 6 months. Her voice was flat. "Since my grandmother died. She raised me after my mum passed when I was little. No other family." "The system?" "Foster care." She said it like a curse. "I tried. 4 different homes in 3 months. The last one..." She cut herself off, but he saw her hand drift to her ribs. Someone had hurt her. The rage that rose in Seo Jun was familiar. Cold, calculating fury. But underneath was something newer, more protective. This child had been failed by every system meant to protect her, had survived 6 months on New York's brutal streets through will and intelligence alone. The car pulled up to Hanok House. Seo Jun led Lyric through the main dining room to a private room in the back. She hesitated at the threshold. "No one can see you here," he said gently. "And no one will bother you. Sit." She sank onto the cushioned floor seating, like her legs had been waiting for permission to give out. The table was already being set with water, tea, and small dishes of banchan. "Order whatever you want," Seo Jun told her, sliding a menu across the table. "I recommend the bulgogi and galbi. The japchae is excellent. And get some rice. Your stomach needs something gentle after going empty so long." Lyric stared at the menu, her small hands trembling slightly. "I'll order for both of us," Seo Jun said gently, signaling the server. He requested a feast: grilled meats, stews, noodles, rice, side dishes. Enough for 4 people because he knew she'd need to eat slowly, but would want options. When the server left, Lyric finally looked directly at him. "I don't understand why you're doing this." "You don't need to understand." He poured her tea. "Just eat." The food came in waves, and Seo Jun watched as Lyric tried to maintain dignity while clearly struggling not to devour everything. She ate slowly, deliberately, occasionally pressing a hand to her stomach. "Tell me about yourself," he said, after she'd taken the edge off her hunger. "Besides the obvious." She glanced up, suspicious. "Why?" "Conversation, or we can sit in silence. Your choice." Lyric considered him. "I'm 10. I go to school when I can. There's a shelter that lets me shower in the mornings, and I keep my uniform in my backpack. I was in the advanced program before everything. I want to study music therapy when I grow up." She said the last part defiantly, as if expecting him to laugh. "Music therapy," Seo Jun repeated. "That's why they named you Lyric." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. "My mom was a singer. Not famous or anything, but she loved music. Said it healed the soul." The smile faded. "She died when I was little, cancer. I'm sorry. Everyone's sorry." Lyric set down her spoon. "But sorry doesn't change anything. Sorry doesn't keep you warm at night or fill your stomach or stop." She cut herself off again. "Stop what?" She shook her head, returning to the food. But Seo Jun had seen the flash of fear in her eyes. Someone was hunting her. Someone specific. His phone buzzed with a message from Jaemin. Background check complete. Lyric Marie Carter, age 10. Grandmother Rose Carter died 6 months ago. Mother Diane Carter deceased 3 years ago. No father on record. Multiple foster placements. Currently listed as runaway. No arrest record. Excellent student at Manhattan Elementary before truancy began 3 months ago. One note of concern. Last foster father, Marcus Webb, has history of complaints. Allegations never proven. Girl disappeared before investigation closed. Seo Jun's grip tightened on his phone. She wasn't just homeless, she was running from a predator who'd probably still be looking for her. "Lyric," he said carefully. "The last foster home. Did someone hurt you?" Her entire body went rigid. "I don't want to talk about it." "Fair enough." He leaned back. "But I need you to understand something. If someone is looking for you, if someone is a threat to you, I can make that problem disappear." She looked at him sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means exactly what you think it means." He held her gaze. "I'm not a good man, Lyric. I'm the kind of man people cross the street to avoid. But I'm also the kind of man who can keep you safe if you let me. You don't even know me. I know enough. He refilled her tea. I know you're smart, proud, and resourceful. I know you've survived 6 months on your own through intelligence and determination. I know you'd rather starve than compromise your dignity. And I know that someone hurt you badly enough that you'd choose the streets over the system meant to protect you. Lyric's eyes glistened with tears. Why do you care? Because I had a sister once who needed someone to care, and no one did. Because I've spent 20 years building power, and it means nothing if I can't use it to stop this. Because you remind me that there's still something human left in me worth saving. Because I can help, he said simply. And because everyone deserves at least one person who gives a damn whether they live or die. The tears spilled over, and Lyric pressed her hands to her face, shoulders shaking. Seo Jun let her cry, let her release what had probably been building for months. When she finally looked up, her eyes were red but determined. If I say yes, she said slowly, if I let you help me, what would that look like? First, somewhere safe to stay. I have properties all over the city. You'd have your own space, your own key, security. Second, you'd go back to school, finish your education. Third, you'd never have to beg for food again. He paused. And fourth, if there's someone you're afraid of, I'll make sure they never bother you again. In exchange for what? Lyric's voice was hard, far too worldly for a 10-year-old. Nothing's free. What would you want from me? The fact that a child her age had to ask made Seo Jun want to destroy everyone who'd taught her that lesson. Nothing you're thinking. I don't prey on children. What I want is simple. You go to school, you stay out of trouble, and you let me know you're safe, that's it. She studied him for a long moment. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but I have conditions. Despite everything, he smiled. Of course you do. I need to be able to leave if I want to. No locked doors. I need to keep going to my school. I have friends there. And I need to know this is real, that you're not going to change your mind and throw me back out. Agreed to all of it, Seo Jun said. Except the last part. I don't change my mind, Lyric. When I commit to something, I see it through. You'll learn that about me. She nodded, some tension leaving her small shoulders. Then yes. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Seo Jun said, pulling out his phone to make arrangements. You might end up regretting this. But as he watched her return to eating, some color finally coming back to her face, he knew the one who might end up with regrets was him. Because in his world, caring about someone was the most dangerous thing you could do. It made you vulnerable. It gave your enemies a target. But looking at Lyric Carter, seeing the strength beneath her fragility, the determination in her tired eyes, Seo Jun decided that some risks were worth taking, even for a man who'd forgotten how to risk anything but money and power. 3 months later, Seo Jun stood in his downtown office, staring at his phone with an expression that had his second-in-command, Min-ho, backing toward the door. Is there a problem, young Nim? Min-ho asked carefully. Lyric got into a fight at school, Seo Jun said flatly. She's suspended for 2 days. Min-ho's eyebrows rose. In the 3 months since Seo Jun had brought the homeless child into his world, the entire organization had watched with fascination as their notoriously cold boss transformed into something resembling a protective father. It was unprecedented. It was dangerous. And it was absolutely entertaining for everyone except Seo Jun. A fight, Min-ho repeated. Lyric? The 10-year-old who volunteers at the animal shelter? Apparently she broke another student's nose. Seo Jun grabbed his jacket. Cancel my afternoon meetings. But the West Side negotiation... I said cancel them. The ice in Seo Jun's tone ended the discussion. 20 minutes later, he walked into the principal's office at Manhattan Elementary to find Lyric sitting ramrod straight, ice pack pressed to her bruised knuckles, her school uniform torn at the shoulder. Her natural hair, recently styled into beautiful box braids, was disheveled, but it was the fierce defiance in her eyes that struck him most. She wasn't sorry. Not even a little. Mr. Kwan, Principal Davidson said with barely concealed disdain, thank you for coming. We have a zero-tolerance policy for violence. What started the fight? Seo Jun interrupted, his attention entirely on Lyric. That's irrelevant. It's completely relevant. He finally looked at the principal, and something in his expression made the older man shrink back. My daughter doesn't start fights without reason. Daughter. The word had slipped out naturally over the past months, though they'd never officially discussed it. Legally, he'd become her guardian through expensive paperwork. Emotionally, the bond had formed faster than either expected. Lyric's eyes widened at the term, but she didn't contradict him. The other student made an inappropriate comment, Principal Davidson said stiffly, but that doesn't justify violence. What comment? Seo Jun's voice dropped dangerously. Mr. Kwon, I don't think— What? Comment. Lyric spoke up, her voice steady despite the anger beneath. He called me a charity case, said I was only here because some rich Korean guy wanted a black pet project to make himself feel good. Then he said you were probably just keeping me around because you felt sorry for me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Seo Jun's expression didn't change, but everyone present felt the shift. The predatory stillness of a man who'd built his empire on knowing exactly how to hurt people where they were most vulnerable. The other student's name, Seo Jun said softly. I can't disclose. Tyler Morrison, Lyric supplied. 6th grader, captain of the soccer team. His dad's on the board of trustees. Ah. Seo Jun smiled, and it was the smile that made hardened criminals confess to crimes they didn't commit. Morrison, I know his father. We've done business together. Principal Davidson paled. Mr. Kwon, I hope you're not suggesting— I'm not suggesting anything. I'm simply noting that Tyler Morrison slandered my daughter with racist accusations, and her response, while technically against school policy, was remarkably restrained. He looked at Lyric. How badly did you hurt him? Broken nose, possibly broken finger from when he tried to grab me. She met his gaze steadily. I remembered what you taught me. Assess the threat, respond with appropriate force, disengage when safe. Pride flickered through Seo Jun's chest. Over the past months, he'd taught her basic self-defense, partly because a man in his position had enemies, but mostly because he'd learned about her time on the streets and wanted her to never feel that vulnerable again. Appropriate force, he repeated approvingly. Then to the principal. Here's what's going to happen. The suspension is unacceptable given the circumstances. Tyler Morrison will face equivalent or greater consequences for his harassment, which, I should note, creates a hostile environment based on race, opening the school to significant legal liability. Now wait just a minute. I'm not finished. Seo Jun's tone could have frozen blood. You'll also be implementing mandatory harassment training for your staff and students with particular attention to racist and sexist microaggressions. They'll be happy to fund it. Consider it a donation to ensure all students feel safe here. The unspoken threat hung in the air. Principal Davidson's mouth opened and closed. He clearly wanted to argue, but was intelligent enough to recognize when he was outmatched. I'll need to discuss this with the board. You do that. In the meantime, Lyric will not be suspended. She'll be receiving a formal apology from young Mr. Morrison in writing, or his family will be dealing with legal action for slander and harassment. Seo Jun stood, buttoning his jacket. Come on, Lyric. Let's go home. She grabbed her backpack and followed him out, waiting until they were in the privacy of his car before speaking. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Seo Jun studied her bruised knuckles. Did he touch you before you hit him? He grabbed my arm. I told him to let go. He didn't. Her jaw tightened. I wasn't going to let another person put their hands on me without permission. Not ever again. The reference to her past foster home made Seo Jun's hands curl into fists. Marcus Webb had disappeared shortly after Lyric moved in with Seo Jun. Not dead, just relocated to Alaska with his finances destroyed, and enough evidence sent to local authorities to ensure he'd never work with children again. Seo Jun had promised Lyric he'd handle it, and he had. You did the right thing, he said quietly. And you'll never have to let anyone hurt you again. I promise you that. Lyric turned to look at him, something vulnerable in her expression. Why do you care so much? I mean, really. I've been thinking about it for 3 months, and I still don't understand. Seo Jun was quiet for a long moment, watching the city blur past the windows. He rarely talked about his past, about the sister who died because he'd been too young and powerless to save her. But Lyric deserved honesty. I had a younger sister, he said finally. Mina. She was around your age when she died. Our father was not a good man. He owed money to the wrong people, and when he couldn't pay, they took it out on her. He felt the familiar ache in his chest. I was 17, working 3 jobs trying to keep us fed. I couldn't protect her. By the time I found her, it was too late. Lyric's small hand found his, squeezed gently. I'm sorry. That's when I decided that being good, being law-abiding, being powerless, none of it mattered if you couldn't protect the people you loved. So I became someone who could. He looked at her directly. I became someone people fear. Someone who has the power to make problems disappear. And I swore that if I ever had the chance to save someone the way I couldn't save Minna, I would, no matter what it cost me. So, I'm like a second chance? Lyric asked softly. No. Seo-jun shook his head. You're not Minna, you're Lyric. You're brilliant and strong and stubborn as hell. You have a future that's entirely your own. But yes, being able to help you, to keep you safe, it means something to me. It means I didn't fail completely. Tears glistened in Lyric's eyes. You know I love you, right? Like, actual family love. Not just gratitude. The words hit Seo-jun harder than any bullet ever had. Love was a weakness in his world, a vulnerability his enemies would exploit without hesitation. But looking at this fierce, brilliant child who'd survived hell and still had the courage to care about people, he couldn't bring himself to regret it. I know, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I love you too, kid. Which is why we're going to have a serious conversation about your fighting technique. You did well, but your stance was sloppy, and you didn't guard your ribs properly. Lyric laughed, the tension breaking. Only you would turn a school fight into a training critique. If you're going to hit people, you should do it correctly, Seo-jun said with mock seriousness. It's a matter of principle. They drove in comfortable silence for a while before Lyric spoke again. That thing you said back there, about me being your daughter. I can petition for legal adoption if you want, Seo-jun said carefully. Make it official, or we can keep things as they are, whatever you're comfortable with. I want it official, Lyric said without hesitation. I want people to know I'm yours, that I belong somewhere to someone. She paused. Is that okay? Seo-jun felt something warm unfurl in his chest, something he'd thought died with Minna all those years ago. Hope, family, purpose beyond power and revenge. Yeah, kid, he said softly. That's more than okay. They were pulling up to his building, a luxury high-rise in Tribeca where Lyric had her own floor, when his phone rang. Minho's name flashed on the screen. Talk to me, Seo-jun answered. We have a problem, Minho said grimly. Lee Sung-min just made a move on the West Side territory. 3 of our businesses hit tonight. And boss, he's asking questions about your daughter. Seo-jun's blood ran cold. Lee Sung-min was the head of a rival Korean organization, ambitious and ruthless in equal measure. If he'd learned about Lyric, if he saw her as leverage, double security, Seo-jun ordered. I want eyes on Lyric 24/7. No one gets close to her. No one. Already done. But Seo-jun, this isn't going to just go away. He knows she's your weakness now. He's going to keep pushing until you respond. Seo-jun looked at Lyric, who was watching him with intelligent eyes that saw too much. She'd heard enough to understand the danger. Then I'll respond, Seo-jun said quietly, but not the way he expects. Set up a meeting, neutral ground, tomorrow night. Are you sure that's wise? No, but it's necessary. He ended the call and turned to Lyric. I need you to stay home for a few days. Extra security, no arguments. Someone's coming after you because of me, she said. It wasn't a question. Someone's trying to use you to get to me, Seo-jun corrected. There's a difference, and they're going to learn very quickly why that's a fatal mistake. Lyric was quiet for a moment. I don't want you to get hurt because of me. That's not how this works. Seo-jun's voice was firm. You're mine to protect, Lyric. That's not negotiable. And anyone who threatens you threatens me. They need to understand that. Even if it starts a war? Especially then. He smiled grimly. Because I've never lost a war, and I'm not about to start now. But as they headed inside, Seo-jun couldn't shake the familiar weight of dread settling in his chest. He'd built his empire by being smarter, more ruthless, more calculating than his enemies. But now, he had something to lose. Someone who mattered more than territory, or money, or power. And in his world, that was the most dangerous thing of all. The warehouse in Red Hook smelled of rust and old blood. Appropriate, Seojun thought, for the conversation he was about to have. He stood in the center of the empty space, Minho and 3 of his best men positioned strategically around him, watching the entrances. Outside, another dozen waited in vehicles, ready to respond if this meeting went sideways. Lee Seung-min arrived exactly on time, his own entourage fanning out in a mirror of Seojun's formation. He was a decade older than Seojun, with silver threading through his dark hair and eyes that had seen, and caused, too much violence. "Kwon Seojun," Lee said in Korean, his tone almost friendly. "Thank you for accepting my invitation. You attacked my businesses and threatened what's mine," Seojun replied in the same language, his voice cold. "This isn't a social call. No, it's business. As it always is between men like us." Lee smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I've heard interesting rumors about you lately, that the great Kwon Seojun, the man who built his empire on having no weaknesses, has acquired a pet project." Seojun's expression didn't change, but Minho stiffened beside him. "I'd choose your next words very carefully. Just stating facts. A young black girl, living in your building, going to fancy private school on your dime. Some people might think you've gone soft, started caring about things beyond profit and power." Lee's smile widened. "Dangerous thing, caring. Makes a man vulnerable." "Is there a point to this?" Seojun asked, his patience wearing thin. "The point is simple. I want the West Side Territory. You've held it for 5 years, but it's time for new management. Give it to me, and your daughter stays safe. Keep it, and well," Lee shrugged, "accidents happen, especially to young children in this city." The warehouse fell silent. Seojun's men tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Minho's face had gone pale with fury, but Seojun himself remained utterly still, his expression unreadable. "Let me make sure I understand," Seojun said softly, each word precisely enunciated. "You're threatening a 10-year-old child to try to force a business concession. I'm simply pointing out realities." "You made a mistake, Lee Seung-min." Seojun's voice dropped even lower, the temperature in the room seeming to plummet. "A fatal one. See, you're right that Lyric is important to me. She's family, and in our world you understand what that means. Family is sacred, untouchable. The fact that you'd even suggest threatening her tells me you've forgotten the most basic rules of our business. Don't be dramatic." "I'm not being dramatic. I'm being clear." Seojun took a step forward, and despite himself, Lee backed up slightly. "You have 48 hours to leave New York. Take your organization and go. I don't care where LA, Chicago, back to Seoul. But if you're still in my city after that deadline, I will dismantle everything you've built. Your businesses, your properties, your relationships, your reputation. And when you have nothing left, when you're as powerless as you tried to make me feel, then we'll talk again about what happens to men who threaten children. You can't, I can, and I will." Seojun's smile was terrible to behold. "You wanted to find my weakness, Lee. Congratulations, you found her. But what you failed to understand is that she's not a weakness. She's a line in the sand, and you just crossed it. So now you get to learn what I'm truly capable of when someone threatens what's mine." Lee's face had gone red with anger. "You're starting a war over a girl." "No," Seojun corrected. "You started a war when you targeted her. I'm ending it. 48 hours, Lee. After that I stop being reasonable." He turned and walked toward the exit, his men falling in around him. Behind him he heard Lee sputtering threats, but they were the empty words of a man who just realized he'd miscalculated badly. "That was risky, Hyung-nim," Minho said once they were in the car. "He might actually try something now." "He won't." Seojun's certainty was absolute. "He's too smart. He knows that actually harming Lyric would unite every other organization against him. Threatening a civilian, especially a child, is a line even we don't cross without consequences. He was bluffing, trying to find leverage. Now he knows there isn't any, not where she's concerned. And if he doesn't leave in 48 hours, then I keep my promise and destroy him." Seojun's tone was matter-of-fact. "Either way, this ends." But when he returned to his building and took the private elevator to Lyric's floor, he found her awake despite the late hour, curled up on her couch with a textbook, security personnel visible through the windows. "Can't sleep?" he asked, dropping into the chair across from her. "Kept thinking about people trying to hurt me to get to you." She closed the book. "That's messed up, right? I mean, I know your world is different, but using kids as leverage, it's messed up, Seo-jun agreed. Which is why it rarely happens. Most people in my business have lines they won't cross. Lee forgot that, or he never learned it in the first place. Is he going to leave? Yes. How can you be sure? Because I gave him a choice between leaving with his empire intact or staying and watching me burn it all down. Seo-jun smiled slightly. He's greedy and ambitious, but he's not stupid. He'll leave. Lyric studied him for a long moment. You'd really start a war for me? Without hesitation. There was no doubt in his voice. Your family, Lyric. In my world, that means everything. It means I'd burn down the city before I let anyone hurt you. She was quiet, processing this. Then, I've been thinking about what you said, about the adoption. And I want to do it. Make it legal and everything. She smiled slightly. Lyric Kwon has a nice ring to it, and I like the idea of people knowing I belong to you, that I have someone who'll go to war for me if necessary. Seo-jun felt that unfamiliar warmth again, the sense of something beyond power and profit mattering. Lyric Carter Kwon, he corrected. Your mother gave you that name. Your grandmother raised you with it. Keep it. Just add mine to it. Tears glistened in her eyes. You're really okay with that? With it being official? I've never been more sure of anything. And it was true. In a life built on calculated risks and strategic relationships, this felt like the first truly honest connection he'd made in years. We'll start the paperwork tomorrow. But Lyric, you need to understand, having my name means you're part of this world now. My enemies will always see you as leverage. Your life will never be completely normal. Normal is overrated, Lyric said firmly. I spent 6 months homeless, fighting just to survive. I know what real danger looks like. And I know what having someone who actually gives a damn feels like. I'll take the second option, even with the complications. You're sure? Completely, she grinned. Besides, someone needs to keep you from turning into a complete cold-hearted monster. Consider it my contribution to society. Seo-jun laughed, a real laugh that surprised them both. Is that your new role? My conscience? Someone has to do it. She sobered slightly. But seriously, thank you. For everything. For seeing me that night, for caring, for protecting me, for being my family when I had none. I know I don't say it enough, but you changed my life. You saved it. You saved mine too, Seo-jun said quietly. I just didn't realize how much I needed saving until I found you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, two people from vastly different worlds who'd somehow found family in each other. Outside, the city glittered with indifferent beauty, full of danger and possibility in equal measure. Seo-jun's phone buzzed with a message from Min-ho. Lee Sung-min just put his properties on the market. Looks like he's leaving. Smart man, Seo-jun thought. He'd learned the most important lesson. Some things weren't worth the cost of trying to take them. Everything okay? Lyric asked, noticing his expression. Everything's fine, Seo-jun assured her. The problem's handled. You're safe. I know I am. Her smile was pure trust. I always am when you're around. And in that moment, Kwon Seo-jun, a man who'd built an empire on fear and power, who'd done terrible things in the name of survival and revenge, felt something he hadn't experienced since his sister died. Peace. Not the absence of danger, because that would never exist in his world, but the peace of knowing he had someone worth protecting. Someone who made all the darkness worthwhile. Someone who called him family and meant it. 8 years later, Seo-jun stood in the back of Manhattan Academy's auditorium, watching 18-year-old Lyric Carter Kwon walk across the stage to accept her diploma. Valedictorian, full scholarship to Columbia University for music therapy, a future so bright it almost hurt to look at. She'd grown into a remarkable young woman, confident, brilliant, compassionate. The scared child who'd begged for expired cake was gone, replaced by someone who knew her worth and refused to compromise it. The adoption had been finalized 7 years ago, making her legally his daughter. But Seo-jun had stopped thinking of it as a legal arrangement long before that. She was his family in every way that mattered. Your daughter is extraordinary, the woman beside him said. Seo-jun glanced over to find Lyric's college advisor, Dr. Patricia Chen, smiling at him. Her entrance essay about homelessness and systemic failure in foster care was one of the most powerful pieces I've read in my 20 years of teaching. She's going to change the world. Yes, she is, Seo-jun agreed. pride evident in his voice, despite his usual stoicism. After the ceremony, Lyric found him in the crowd, diploma in hand, her natural hair styled in elegant twists adorned with small gold beads. She'd grown into her beauty, carrying herself with a grace that came from knowing she was loved and protected. "We did it," she said, hugging him tightly. "You did it," Seo-jun corrected. "I just provided the resources. The hard work was all you. Please, you literally threatened the principal into giving me extra tutoring after the suspension incident when I was 10. She laughed. "Don't pretend you weren't involved. I simply ensured you had the tools you needed to succeed." He smiled. "The rest was your determination." They were heading to the car for the graduation dinner he'd planned, a private room at her favorite restaurant, with Minho and the other members of Seo-jun's inner circle, who'd become her unlikely extended family, when his phone rang. The name that flashed on the screen made his blood run cold. James Morrison, Tyler Morrison's father. And more importantly, a business associate who Seo-jun had carefully maintained a cordial but distant relationship with for years. "I need to take this," he told Lyric, stepping away. "Mr. Morrison." "Kwan." Morrison's voice was tight, with barely controlled anger. "We need to talk. About your daughter and my son." Every protective instinct Seo-jun had developed over the past 8 years went on high alert. "What about them?" "Tyler has been spending time with her. At school. They're friends, apparently, and he's expressed interest in more than friendship." Morrison's tone made it clear what he thought of that idea. "I'm calling to make sure we're on the same page about this being unacceptable." Seo-jun's jaw tightened. "Unacceptable because... Come on, Kwan. Don't be naive. Our worlds don't mix. Your daughter is a lovely girl, I'm sure, but she's not appropriate for my son. Different backgrounds, different expectations. You understand?" The code was clear. Race. Class. The subtle bigotry of the wealthy who dressed their prejudice in concern about compatibility and different worlds. "What I understand," Seo-jun said coldly, "is that you're suggesting my daughter isn't good enough for your son. Would you care to say that more directly?" "I'm being realistic. You're being a bigot." Seo-jun's voice could have frozen nitrogen. "And you're about to learn a very expensive lesson about what happens when you insult my family. First, your son isn't good enough for Lyric. He never was and never will be. She's worth 10 of him. Second, if you ever imply again that she's somehow inferior because of her race or background, I will personally ensure every business deal you have in this city crumbles. Are we clear? You can't threaten me. I'm not threatening, I'm promising. Touch my daughter's reputation. Suggest she's not worthy, and you'll discover exactly how much power I have in this city." He paused. "And Morrison? For what it's worth, Lyric isn't interested in Tyler. She has better taste and higher standards. But if she were interested, and if Tyler were actually worthy of her time, I'd support it. Because I judge people on character, not prejudice. You should try it sometime." He ended the call and turned to find Lyric standing a few feet away, having clearly heard at least his side of the conversation. "Tyler's dad?" she asked, "expressing concerns about you spending time with his son." "We're just friends," Lyric said immediately. "And honestly, even that's charitable. He apologized after the fight when I was 10, and we've been civil, but he's still kind of a jerk, just a more subtle one now. His father seems to think you have designs on his precious heir." Seo-jun couldn't keep the disgust from his voice. "I set him straight. Let me guess. He said something racist but tried to make it sound like reasonable concern." Lyric's expression was knowing. "It's okay, Dad. I'm used to it. These people have been looking down on me my whole life. Rich, powerful father or not, I'm still black. Some of them will never see past that." The casual way she said it, the acceptance in her voice, made Seo-jun's heart ache. "It's not okay, and you shouldn't have to be used to it." "No, I shouldn't, but I am. And you know what? It doesn't matter," she smiled, "because I know who I am. I know my worth, and I have a father who'd burn down the city for me if necessary. That's more than most people get." Seo-jun pulled her into a hug, fierce and protective. "I'm sorry the world is like this. Me too, but we'll change it. One day at a time, starting with me going to Columbia and becoming an amazing music therapist who helps people heal." She pulled back, grinning. "Besides, Tyler Morrison, please, I can do so much better." "Damn right you can," Minho said, appearing with the car. "You're a Quan now. We have standards." They were laughing as they headed to dinner, the tension broken. But later that night, alone in his office, Seo-jun found himself thinking about the conversation with Morrison, about all the conversations Lyric must have endured over the years, the subtle and not-so-subtle racism, the assumptions about her worth based on her skin color. She'd grown up strong despite it, but she shouldn't have had to. And while Seo-jun couldn't change the world overnight, he could make damn sure that anyone who tried to diminish her in his presence learned a costly lesson. His phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. "She's beautiful, smart, strong, everything you said she was. But beauty can be fragile. Strength can be tested. Just something to think about." Seo-jun's blood ran cold as he read it again. Someone was watching Lyric. Someone knew enough about her to know what she meant to him. Someone was threatening her. He forwarded the message to Minho with a single instruction: "Find them. Now." Within an hour, his entire organization was mobilizing. Security was doubled around Lyric, though she didn't know it yet. Every contact, every enemy, every person who might have reason to target him through her was being investigated. But it was the message itself that worried him most. The intimate knowledge it suggested. The confidence of someone who thought they could threaten his daughter and survive. Seo-jun had promised Lyric she was safe. He'd promised her nothing would hurt her, and he always kept his promises, no matter how much blood he had to spill to do it. The break came 3 days later, when Minho traced the threatening message to a phone belonging to David Chen, a mid-level player in a rival organization who'd been quietly gathering information on Seo-jun's operations for months. More concerning, Chen had been photographed outside Lyric's university campus, sitting in a coffee shop with sightlines to the music building where she had classes. "He's not the mastermind," Minho reported, spreading surveillance photos across Seo-jun's desk. "Someone hired him to gather intel and send that message. Someone who wants you distracted and worried. Someone who's patient enough to wait for the right moment to strike." "Who?" Seo-jun's voice was deadly quiet. "We're still tracking it, but the money trail leads to—" Minho hesitated. "It leads to Thomas Webb, Marcus Webb's brother." Marcus Webb, Lyric's former foster father, the man Seo-jun had ruined and driven from the city 8 years ago, the predator who'd tried to hurt her. "I should have killed him," Seo-jun said flatly. "I showed mercy, and now his family is coming after her. We don't know for sure it's retaliation. What else would it be?" Seo-jun stood, already reaching for his jacket. "Where is she right now?" "Safe. At the university library with 3 of our people watching. She thinks they're fellow students." Minho checked his phone. "But boss, if you go after Thomas Webb directly, he threatened my daughter." The words came out cold and final. "There's no world where that ends anyway except with him dead or wishing he was. At least bring backup. Don't go alone." Seo-jun nodded curtly. He was angry, but he wasn't stupid. This could be a trap designed to draw him out, to make him act rashly. But sitting back and waiting wasn't an option either. Not when Lyric was in danger. They found Thomas Webb at a rundown bar in Queens, already drunk at 3 in the afternoon. He looked up as Seo-jun and his men entered, and something like satisfaction crossed his face. "Knew you'd come," Webb slurred. "Knew you'd come running when I threatened your little pet." "She's not a pet," Seo-jun said quietly, approaching the bar. "She's my daughter, and you made a fatal mistake when you sent that message." "Fatal?" Webb laughed bitterly. "You already destroyed my brother, destroyed our family, because of her, because that ungrateful little—" He didn't get to finish the sentence. Seo-jun's fist connected with Webb's jaw hard enough to knock him off the bar stool. The other patrons scattered, wise enough to recognize dangerous men when they saw them. "Your brother destroyed himself," Seo-jun said, standing over Webb's prone form. "He preyed on a child in his care. I simply made sure he faced consequences. The fact that you think threatening Lyric somehow balances that score tells me you're just as much of a monster as he is." Webb spat blood. "She was nothing. A homeless black girl no one wanted. Marcus gave her a place to stay, and she repaid him by lying." "She didn't lie." Seo-jun's voice was ice. "I saw the evidence. The medical reports. The testimony from other girls your brother hurt. Lyric was the only one brave enough to run, smart enough to survive on the streets, rather than stay in his house. And now you want revenge? For what? For her refusing to be victimized? For destroying our family? Webb struggled to his feet, swaying. For turning you against us. Do you know what it's like, having the great Kwon Seo-jun as an enemy? We lost everything. Good. Seo-jun's smile was terrible. You should have lost more, but I'm about to correct that oversight. What happened next took less than 10 minutes. Minho's people efficiently collected evidence. Webb's phone with messages to David Chen, financial records showing payments for surveillance, even notes detailing Lyric's schedule and routine. Everything needed to prove conspiracy to commit kidnapping, harassment, and stalking. You're not going to kill me? Webb asked, confused and terrified as they zip-tied his hands. No, Seo-jun said. I'm going to do something worse. I'm going to send you to prison with evidence that you targeted a young woman. Do you know what happens to men like you in prison, Webb? Men who hurt children? Webb's face went white. That's right, Seo-jun continued. You're going to spend the next 10 to 15 years in a place where everyone knows exactly what you are, where you'll be as powerless and afraid as Lyric was in your brother's house. And every day you're there, you can think about the fact that you brought this on yourself. He turned to Minho. Make sure the right people know what he's in for. I want him to experience exactly what he intended for her. With pleasure, Minho said grimly. But as they were leaving, Webb called out, She'll never really be yours, you know. She's not your blood, not your real family. Just a charity case you took pity on. Seo-jun stopped, turned back. For a moment his expression was unreadable. Then he smiled, and it was genuine. You're wrong, he said simply. Blood doesn't make family. Love does. Choice does. The fact that I chose Lyric and she chose me makes us more family than most people who share DNA. And the fact that you can't understand that just proves how empty your life really is. He left Webb to his fate and headed straight to Columbia's campus. Lyric was still in the library, surrounded by music therapy textbooks, completely unaware of the danger that had been circling her. Dad? She looked up, surprised. What are you doing here? We need to talk. He gestured to a private study room. Once inside, he told her everything. The message, the surveillance, Thomas Webb, all of it. Lyric listened in silence, her expression growing darker. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You arrested him? She asked finally. I had him arrested. There's a difference. The police have him now with enough evidence to put him away for years. Why not just... She made a vague gesture. You know, make him disappear. Isn't that what people in your world do? Sometimes, Seo-jun admitted. But I wanted you to know that the law could work, that there are consequences beyond my world. And I wanted him to suffer properly, not just die, but face justice. Lyric nodded slowly. Thank you, for protecting me, for handling it, for caring enough to come after him. Always, Seo-jun said simply. You're my daughter, Lyric, legally, emotionally, in every way that matters, and I will always protect you, no matter what it costs me. She hugged him tightly. I love you, Dad. I love you too. He held her close, feeling the familiar mix of fierce protectiveness and pride. Now, come on. We're going home. You can study there, with proper security. I have 3 bodyguards pretending to be students, Lyric pointed out. How much more security do I need? 6 bodyguards, Seo-jun said. Maybe 7, I'm still deciding. She laughed, and the sound chased away some of the darkness from the past few days. They left the library together, father and daughter, walking through the campus as evening fell over the city. Hey, Dad, Lyric said as they reached the car. Yeah, remember that night you found me behind the bakery, when I asked about expired cake? Of course. I was so scared. Hungry, desperate, certain I was going to die on those streets. And then you showed up. She smiled. You literally saved my life. But more than that, you gave me a life worth living, a family, a future. I just wanted you to know that I remember. I'll always remember. Seo-jun felt his throat tighten with emotion. Do you have any expired cake? He quoted softly. That's what you asked. And you know what? In that moment, I saw exactly what I'd been missing in my life. Purpose. Connection. Someone who reminded me that power means nothing if you can't use it to help people who need it. We saved each other, Lyric said. Yeah, Seo-jun agreed. We did. The drive home was quiet. both of them lost in thought. The city sprawled around them, full of danger and beauty and possibility. But inside the car there was only peace, only family, only love. And for Kwon Seo-jun, a man who'd built his empire on fear and power, that was worth more than all the territory and money in the world. Years had passed since that rainy night when everything changed. Lyric sat in her office at the Children's Hospital, surrounded by instruments and therapy materials, reviewing notes from her morning sessions. At 24, she'd become exactly what she'd dreamed of, a music therapist specializing in trauma recovery, helping children who'd experienced abuse, homelessness, and abandonment find their voices through music. The irony wasn't lost on her. She'd become the person she'd needed when she was 10. Her phone buzzed with a message from her father. "Dinner tonight. I have news." She smiled, texting back, "Your place or mine?" "Mine. 7 p.m. Bring your appetite. The chef is making bulgogi." Lyric's own apartment was in a beautiful building in Brooklyn, but she still spent several nights a week at her father's penthouse in Tribeca. Some things didn't change, even with time and independence. That evening, she arrived to find Seo-jun waiting with Min-ho and several other members of what she'd long ago accepted as her extended family. They'd watched her grow up, had been there for graduations and heartbreaks and triumphs. "Okay, what's the news?" she asked, accepting a glass of wine. Seo-jun's expression was carefully neutral. "I'm retiring." Silence fell over the room. Lyric stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "You're what?" "Retiring. From the business. All of it." He smiled slightly at her shock. "I've been planning it for the past year. Transferring operations, liquidating certain assets, setting up legitimate businesses to replace the others. Min-ho is taking over leadership. I'm done." "But why?" Lyric asked, still processing. "Because I'm 50 years old and I've spent 33 of those years in a world of violence and danger. Because I have a daughter who's building a beautiful life helping people, and I want to be part of that life without constantly looking over my shoulder for enemies. Because you showed me that there's more to life than power and control, and I want to live that life while I still can." Tears pricked Lyric's eyes. "Dad, I'm not dying or anything dramatic," he added quickly. "I'm just choosing something different, something better. I've already bought a house upstate. Nothing ridiculous, just something comfortable with a garden and room for you to visit. I'm thinking about teaching, actually. Business management. Sharing what I know with young people trying to build legitimate careers." "He's been volunteering at a youth center in the Bronx," Min-ho added with a grin, "teaching kids about finance and entrepreneurship. It's disgustingly wholesome." Lyric laughed through her tears. "You at a youth center? Someone needs to teach these kids how money actually works," Seo-jun said defensively. "And I have skills that are useful even outside of criminal enterprises." "I think it's wonderful," Lyric said, hugging him tightly. "I'm proud of you. For choosing this. For choosing peace." "I learned it from you," Seo-jun said quietly. "You chose peace over revenge. You chose healing over hate. You chose to build something beautiful from all that trauma. I figured it was time I learned the same lesson." They celebrated that night, the whole strange family that had formed around two people who'd found each other in an alley on a rainy night. There was laughter and food and stories about the past, but mostly there was love, the kind that transcended blood and law, that was built on choice and commitment, and the daily decision to care about someone else's well-being. Later, after everyone had left and Lyric was preparing to head home, Seo-jun stopped her. "I have something for you," he said, pulling out a small wooden box. Inside was a key. "Remember how I said I bought a house upstate? Well, I may have also bought the house next door. For you, if you want it. A place to escape the city on weekends, maybe see patients in a quieter setting, or just a place to rest." Lyric took the key, overwhelmed. "You bought me a house." "I bought you a home," he corrected. "There's a difference. A house is just a building. A home is somewhere you're safe, somewhere you're loved, somewhere you belong." He smiled. "You gave that to me years ago when you agreed to be my daughter. I figured it was time to return the favor." "I already have a home," Lyric said, gesturing around them. "Wherever you are, that's home." "Good answer," Seo-jun said, pulling her into a hug. "But you're still taking the house. Consider it an investment in my future peace of mind." They stood there for a moment, father and daughter, thinking about the journey that had brought them to this place, from a desperate child begging for expired cake to a woman building a career on helping others heal, from a lonely crime boss drowning in power to a man choosing peace and purpose over profit. "Hey, Dad," Lyric said softly. "Yeah? Thank you. For everything. For seeing me that night. For caring. For being my family when I had none. For showing me that love can heal even the deepest wounds." "Thank you for letting me," Seo-jun replied. "For trusting me. For teaching me that there's more to life than power and revenge. For reminding me that family is a choice, and it's the most important choice we ever make." "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't stopped that night?" Lyric asked. "If you'd just driven past?" "Every day," Seo-jun admitted. "And every day I'm grateful I stopped. Because you saved my life as much as I saved yours. You gave me a reason to be better, to choose light over darkness, to remember that there's still good in the world worth protecting." Lyric smiled, thinking about the scared child she'd been, begging for scraps behind a bakery, thinking about the powerful man who'd seen past her circumstances to the person underneath, thinking about all the ways they'd healed each other. "We make a pretty good team," she said. "The best," Seo-jun agreed. And as Lyric headed home that night, the key to her new house in her pocket and her father's love warming her heart, she thought about the journey they'd taken together, about the power of choosing to care, to protect, to love fiercely and without reservation, about how sometimes the most important moments in life happen in dirty alleys on rainy nights, when two people who need saving find each other, about how family isn't defined by blood or law, but by the daily choice to show up for each other, no matter what, and about how love, real, unconditional, transformative love, can heal even the deepest wounds and turn strangers into family. Behind a bakery in Manhattan, a young girl once asked a simple question: "Do you have any expired cake?" And a lonely man answered by giving her something far more valuable than food. He gave her a home, a family, a future. He gave her love, and in return, she gave him the same. Years later, Seo-jun stood in the garden of his upstate home, watching as Lyric worked with a group of children from the local community center. At 30 years old, she'd become one of the most sought-after music therapists in the country, but she still made time every week to volunteer with kids who reminded her of herself. The little girl currently struggling with a ukulele looked up at Lyric with the same mixture of hope and wariness that Seo-jun remembered from that rainy night 20 years ago. She was homeless too, recently placed in foster care, carrying trauma that showed in every tense line of her small body. But Lyric sat beside her with infinite patience, showing her how to make music from pain, how to find her voice when the world tried to silence her. "She's good at this," Minho said, appearing beside Seo-jun with 2 cups of coffee. "She should be," Seo-jun replied. "She lived it." They watched in comfortable silence as Lyric coaxed the first real smile from the little girl. When the child finally managed a simple melody, her whole face lit up with pride and joy. Later, after the children had left and it was just the two of them sitting on the porch watching the sunset, Lyric leaned her head on Seo-jun's shoulder. "Remember when I asked you for expired cake?" she said softly. "Best question anyone ever asked me," Seo-jun replied. "You gave me so much more than cake that night. We gave each other everything that mattered." He squeezed her hand. "A second chance. A family. A reason to be better." Lyric smiled, thinking about the scared 10-year-old she'd been and the woman she'd become, about the lonely crime boss who'd found redemption in an act of kindness, about how one moment of compassion could change 2 lives forever. "Do you have any expired cake?" she quoted softly. "No," Seo-jun said, pulling her close. "But I have something better. I have you, and that's worth more than anything else in the world." And it was true, it always had been, it always would be. It